we're really thrilled to welcome Nathan Bonds from Polaris MEP. Polaris MEP also is a great partner in putting this event together. So we thank them so much. And they are masters of operations and manufacturing. And they support businesses far and wide in many different sectors, but have a focus in one, as one of many in the food sector, and have helped a lot of businesses operationalize their procedures and scale, find co-packers, and so forth. So for this conversation, we have Nathan Bonds of Polaris MEP moderating discussion with Minnie Luong from Chi Kitchen, Ben Alvik from Fully Rooted, and Dinos Stamoulis. Are all of you with us?
I am here, yes.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
There we go.
Yeah.
Nice,
Well,
nice bow tie, Nate.
Thanks.
Nate, take it away.
Sure. So yeah, I thank you so much, Avi. And I've had a chance to meet Avi and do an event at Venture Cafe, which was totally fun and off the hook, if you guys are allowing me to use that type of terminology. But I just love being able to have the opportunity to work with food and beverage rock stars such as Minnie and Ben and Dinos. And so we're just going to cover 4 topics today. And the first one is going to be scaling recipes, balancing the cost of equipment and raw materials, finding the right co-packer or do it yourself. And then the last one, I'm sure that everyone wants to know about this one. And this is how to ensure quality assurance. And so if you're taking notes, write this down. If you're not taking notes from these 3 great individuals, write this down. So I'm excited for everyone who's listening and attending to learn from these 3 great individuals. So let's get right into it. Dinos, can you please share with those attending your approach to say the 3 main things you would do and have done when scaling your recipes from the household approach to where you are currently?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first thing is you got to know your numbers. So whenever you're going from ounces and cups or smaller measurements like that, you want to be able to have in front of you so that as you scale, you can transfer that from cups to pounds to thousands of pounds, et cetera. You want to be able to make sure that your percentages will replicate as you duplicate your phases of scaling. The other thing I think that's really important is to make sure that you understand what your capacity is. So what makes sense. You don't want to scale up a recipe 2 weeks because you have so much product on hand. So that's a balancing act that I think everybody knows their constraints and the areas that they play within. And then lastly, I think, it's important to understand where you're going to see efficiencies in costs. So as you scale a recipe and as you develop that relationship with your supply chain, your costs should come in a little bit. And depending upon the commodities that you're buying, the cost may fluctuate quite a bit. But as you scale and you grow, you'll get more consistent volumes and you'll be able to work that in, which will benefit margins in the long run.
And Dinos, I've heard a lot about, I love it, through Amy, iterate. So knowing my numbers, can I just throw a new 10x or 5x at this scaling formula? And the blueberry and cinnamon in my paleo nola that I love, it's going to taste great at 1,000 pounds.
No, I guess that's the other thing to be conscious of as you grow. There's a mysterious person in the mix who sometimes changes around the final taste and quality of whatever you're making. it's naturally going to happen on a scale up that at a certain weight, the end result is going to change, and it may change dramatically or it may change just slightly, but whether the taste or the texture might be off. And that's why it's critical to have all the numbers accurate, because you'll have a percentage window that you'll be able to play with when you can tell that this recipe, as it was in a little bowl, is completely different now that it's coming out of a 300-pound mixer.
Okay, that's a great point, Dinos. Minnie, can you share with us and piggyback off of what Dinos said? Is okay, so I'm making this kimchi that's absolutely wonderful, and I was making it in a 5-gallon bucket, and now I have to make it in a drum, or I have to make it in this gargantuan stainless steel thing that looks like a boat. Can you tell us what do you do? What would you do in scaling your recipes, Minnie?
Hi, Dinos. Well, I would just say that something to take into consideration. We've really done ours kind of like incrementally, and the iterations. But something that we came across as we were growing from just very, very small batches to progressively bigger batches is the equipment that we would need, and then the storage space for it. So for example, we started with these just bins for a long time, and then they were very heavy and we'd have to transfer them. And then now we're fermenting in 55-gallon drums, and as we just like organized all of our drums 5S.
Great job, by the way.
Because it's like, okay, this is great that we're scaling up, but where are we going to put all this stuff, in our limited space?
So Ben, if you could share with us, as we're coming into this beautiful fall season, how you scaled your recipes. Hey, we have this household juicer, and now we're getting apples in October, and they're sweeter than they were in September. Can you share with us how you scale your recipes, and what are some pointers that people like Amber would like to know, or something like that people want to tune in to write these answers down?
Yeah, for us, some of the scaling has been fairly easy because the ratios of the ingredients of the juice remains the same. And we don't have some of the challenges that, like, say, Dinos would have when scaling with larger equipment, because we're mixing those flavors same way as we would no matter what juicer. Although there is some minor change as to how some juicers operate and the flavor that results of that. But when we create a new flavor, we actually go back to the small home style juicer that we started our business with to figure out what we want to make, and then we do that on our big juicer. So the small juicer does like 1 gallon per hour, and we're only doing maybe 1 gallon for testing. And then once that's finalized, we do 20 gallons per hour in huge like 40-gallon batches. But when it comes to kombucha, we did experience some mysterious changes when we were scaling, where we needed either more or less tea when we brought the batch size from, say, 3 gallons to 40 gallons. But once we figured it out, it was a minor change. Over time, we could find ways to actually make the flavor a little bit better.
I really like how the three of you all mentioned that you should know your numbers. I really took that from Dinos and Minnie and Ben, that everyone should know your numbers, but that as a cautionary method, that a bad process will beat a good person every time. But if you have a process, like what Ben talked about, hey, we go back, if we're going to have a new product, we're going to go back to that home style juicer. And to Dino's point, there might be some mysterious ingredients that don't play well with others as you're scaling up. Would you all say that was a pretty decent synopsis of scaling recipes. Don't everyone speak at once. No.
Well, I'll just say the first time I ever made kimchi, long before I would ever consider having a kimchi business, was it came out terrible. It was just absolutely horrible. I was just making it in my apartment in Cambridge, and I spent 12 hours brining it, and I was like, oh, forget this. I'm never doing this again. And I didn't make it again until 6 years later, and I moved across the country, and I was just making it for fun. So I think you do want to just keep trying and not give up. And like what Dino said earlier, like as you are scaling up and you are going to get those efficiencies, it's not necessarily going to happen right away, and that you might run into other issues. You might solve that problem, and then you might run into other issues. So that's why having like the continuous improvement is like it's in your back pocket, so that you're going to face that. And at the end of the day, we're all creators, and this is just part of the creative being creators.
No, Minnie, I really appreciate that, and the insight that the three of you gave on that topic, I think was totally helpful, and I've learned a lot. So I'm sure that others they're thinking about those juicers and starting about the scaling recipe. So we'll move into the topic, which is the second topic, which is I've already heard this word once, but I'm hearing it now a second time. And it sounds like the balancing act of equipment and cost of raw materials. So let's discuss how you balance and are balancing your equipment and the raw materials that are procured. So Minnie, could you kick us off on this second topic?
Sure. Well, luckily our kimchi is handcrafted. Pretty much, I would say 90%. We only use one piece of mechanical equipment to puree our paste. But that doesn't mean that we don't apply, manufacturing principles to what we do. So we're always trying to balance costs and particularly our cash flow. And what I think is interesting right now with COVID is because of things that people had mentioned even previous to this about, supply chain issues and, for us, there's a glass shortage, which we pack into, and we've had to kind of face, do we spend the cash, to buy these pallets of jars, with knowing that, there might be a shortage and we might not be able to fulfill orders, and that's what we want to do, the most. So luckily we do have some operating cash so that we can do that. But I would say, costs of raw ingredients, they should be going down as you buy more in bulk, but you need the cash to do that. And then not only that, but you need the space and the storage. We, got moved into our kitchen last year and had this huge walk-in, and even already we're finding, a shortage of space, and we're having conversations about, okay, what are we going to do if we, run out of the cooler space? But you can organize your space better. So that's what we have been kind of focusing on, like organizing our drums in our space. And that doesn't cost very much money. It just costs some time and some energy. And I mean, ultimately, we want to run as lean as possible. We don't want to have extra inventory. I see pallets of jars as just like dollar signs, that are just sitting there, not making money for us. But and then in terms of equipment, I bought, I'm very wary about equipment right now because, I bought some stuff when we were starting out or when we wanted to scale up and grow. And when we actually went through the Kaizen and did the data, like it was just pointless. And I just thought, like in my mind, having that conveyor belt was, I'm like, I'm so cool. I'm a manufacturer. I have this like piece of equipment, and then the data proved that it was just totally useless and that everyone actually wanted to be closer to each other, not pushing things away from each other. So that was something I learned, and I don't think I would have learned that without working with you and Lean. So when we did do our Kaizen, you know, in our packing process, we literally just used duct tape and cardboard and scissors. And we were able to kind of fashion some prototypes. And what we ultimately did for equipment was the two major pieces were we actually fabricated ourselves, designed and fabricated ourselves. And they're not, you know, mechanical. One is a turnstile to help seal the shrink bands on our jars, so that freed up some hand space. And another thing, it's a hair dryer stand that was $20 on Amazon, so that someone didn't have to stand there and hold the heat gun. So things like that, I think, you know, to just think a little bit outside of the box about what you can do, making like the big financial investments, you really want to like kind of get the data before you do that.
Minnie, I like how you shared sort of what Danny Warshay says is we want to fail fast and fail cheap with the equipment.
Exactly.
And the innovation piece that Avi was even talking about, that we want a boring, good process, but with a lot of innovation with the improvement. So thank you for sharing that. Dinos, so can you walk us through your balancing act with oven and kind of talk about one, did you have an iteration with ovens? Did you have an iteration with raw materials? And how did it work out? The bigger you grew and the more raw materials you needed and the bigger ovens that you needed, how did it work? Can you talk about that?
Definitely. I think the constraint is something that you're always going to have to keep an eye on. And as you grow, that constraint is going to adjust. And additionally, what happens is we started with a deck oven. So a deck oven has space for 2 sheet pans. So you're going to buy raw materials that, corresponds with the amount that you can produce in one day. Sort of what Minnie said, like you don't want to have all this stuff just sitting around because you're capable. When we made the jump from a deck oven to a convection oven, we went from 2 sheet pans to 10, but even the efficiencies within that process were a little bit slower because they cook a little uneven. You have to stop, you have to rotate, you have to check on things because they can burn a lot faster. And even though you're growing the amount that you can produce, sometimes the efficiencies drop. But that can be the necessary evil in the process of scaling. And then from there, we were selling more and we were required to produce more and a lot quicker. And we looked at the process, and instead of killing ourselves and working 10 hours a day, we said, okay, now there's this point of misery where you hate what you're doing because you've been doing it for 12 hours a day every single day, and it makes sense to alleviate some of that pressure and get rid of that constraint. And so we jumped to a rack rolling oven that can do 80 sheet pans in one run. So the constraint will continue to move to the next part of the process. It's just understanding what is the ideal timing based on, number one, your sales. Can you afford it? And two, how painful of a process do you want to put up with until you make that leap?
Dinos, I love what's resonating right now is the point of misery that we would like to address. So you talked about the theory of constraints when it comes to manufacturing sciences, and that is every company has a constraint. And Minnie and Dinos and Ben, you all decide where you want that constraint to be. And that's where the focus of that process is. So I love that, the point of misery. So Ben, can you share with us your shameful point of misery?
Yes, I certainly can. Juicing is a very laborious process. As anyone that has made their own juice will know, there's lots of cutting and cleaning and all that kind of stuff. So when we started Fully Rooted, we were using home style juicers and cutting up all the carrots and all those things. And I remember just cutting carrots for hours. So we hit that point of misery pretty quick and just suffered through it for a while until we could get to the next step, which would be going from 1 gallon per hour with one juicer to 20 plus gallons per hour with a $30,000 juicer that we got a business loan for, that we could actually grow into and would make us we didn't have to cut things up or anything like that. It would really relieve that point of misery. And I'm thinking back to the first time we put like a full bag of carrots in and didn't have to cut them, and it was amazing. But we had to get to a point where we could justify the sales to get that juicer and get a loan to do so. But for us, we have a unique product that has a very short shelf life, and we have a good relationship with our supplier where it also just works out well with them, where we can place an order by midnight and then the next day it's delivered, and that we can order exactly what we need as we need it, and we don't have to store much. And then once our product's made, it has to be out the door immediately that same day or the next day anyways. And then when it comes to other points of misery, it's mostly just refrigeration for us and equipment. So equipment that's either more efficient in juicy yields, such as like a citrus juicer. That's our next focus.
Okay.
So that will have higher yields and more, it'll juice faster. So we can shave a couple hours of production off and allow that person to do more things in the day. But yeah, we definitely have felt that point of misery multiple times. And right now we're working on that with citrus and refrigeration.
No, I really like how the three of you, so it to me, Dino's is what we would call like dry goods. And yet he had to focus on his equipment, which then focused on the amount of raw materials that would be needed for that similar equipment. And then Minnie is literally right in the middle of both of you guys, as her product, yes, it has weight, but she also has juice as well. And that juice is what I think that her and Tim would call liquid gold. And each one of her products, yes, it has to have dried goods, but also juice. And then Ben, yours as well is just all juice. You're taking the raw materials and converting it into completely just a juiced product. And so I really like how the three of you really talked about in this journey that you had, was that, okay, are we going to look at the process? Do we really need to validate a need for bigger, more expensive, newer equipment? And then once we go to that equipment, we're going to focus our process to use that actual equipment. We're not just going to buy equipment and then see if it works or not. It's a very cautionary type of thing. Does that sound right that we covered in that topic?
Yes, but also keeping in mind the payoff time for these things and making sure that well.
No, very good point. So you know what, that Ben, before we move to that third topic, yes, would Minnie, you or Dinos or Ben, would you recommend to those who are listening who, they've had a startup, now they're like, all right, it's about time for me to walk this thing out. So, when should I look at, I'm going to get a loan, or I'm looking at investing in this equipment? Should I look at a 1-year payback, a 2-year payback? Ben, since you brought it up, could you share with us first what that might look at?
Well, I've actually been learning from Dinos recently about this, and he's helping us decide on refrigeration and whatnot. And we're also heading towards automating our bottling process, because right now we're hand filling hundreds and hundreds of bottles at each production day. So something that can take a year or less to pay off is kind of like a no-brainer. And then things that more, that more along the lines of like 2 or 3 years, it requires some deep thought and some projections to make those decisions.
Okay. Minnie, what about you? Did you want to chime in on the payback period?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ben. Like if you can get it, paid back in a year, like there's some cheap money out there, you do have to make investments if you want to grow. I think, it's, you want to figure out how you, what the numbers are of what you can grow. And then there's other pieces aside from just the equipment, the space. And like for, I've looked into, kimchi lines and things like that. It's like, unfortunately, you have to buy the entire line. So it's
Okay.
very, very, very cost prohibitive, so I think it also depends on your product, but I'd really be curious to see what Dino says.
Yeah, Dinos, take us home on this one.
Yeah, I think one of the things we had talked about was, if you're going to do some sort of equipment purchase, there's a million different ways you can do it. But the thing that is most important is to figure out, okay, what efficiencies are you going to gain from this? And if it's a 2x or maybe even a 3x, I don't even think that's worth it. And I think you could probably learn a little bit more, like Minnie said, reorganize, readjust things to get yourself a higher yield. When you start getting into 4 and 5x efficiency scales, I think that makes sense. But what you really want to do is focus on not only the payback period at current sales level, but what happens if you lose a client. Okay. So like if your consistent sales adjust abruptly, does that payback period still look like a year horizon, or does now that change dramatically? So you really want to make sure before you pull the trigger, okay, I have 3 scenarios. This is best case scenario, this is consistent scenario, and then this is worst case, that you'll be able to come out on top.
That's excellent. No, thank you for sharing, Dinos. And it sounds like we've already heard from the CEO, and Dinos, his title is Chief of Awesomeness. And Ben, I'm not quite for sure what yours is, but it has nothing to do with so we're not even going to go there. But it sounds like the 3 of you, if those of you who are listening who are not at the level that Minnie and Ben and Dinos are, is literally reaching out to like-minded entrepreneurs that would certainly help you walk through that process. Would you agree with that, the 3 of you?
Definitely.
Definitely.
There's so many other people around, and it's a nice community.
Yes.
We've been learning from each other, the 3 of us already. So it's kind of funny that we're all here together today.
Yeah, some of you might not know this, but we're actually all in the same building and we're all pretty much literally neighbors and we can all smell each other's delicious products. And I think, when it's been great to have, just see our businesses progress, and, we're all at different levels and different, parts in our journey, but it's been really, awesome to learn so much and share so much with both of you guys. And it's great just because my parents don't really want to hear about equipment and things that we're discussing, and it's nice to have other people kind of to talk to that understand lean 5S, whatever it is. Because they all think it looks amazing on social media, but like when a piece of equipment breaks down and you're freaking out, it's a whole nother thing.
Yes. So before we move to our third topic, I know Avi typed in the chat there. Have you all explored other, how shall I say this, opportunities for waste, cold vegetables, or wasted paleo nola as hamster food, or no, something like that. And have you guys thought about, waste that is what you all would consider waste to your process? And we can briefly talk about it for 1 minute. Or if you want to bypass that, and we'll just put it in the chat. Ben, you or Minnie, share with that.
I can speak briefly. I mean, we do have a lot of waste because of all the fiber left from the fruits and vegetables that we juice, and we have thought of things, but it's kind of like a whole other business if we were to start, drying it and blending it with other things and turning it into dog food or whatever. We have done some experimentation, or we'll dry things just to make snacks for ourselves. But it would require probably a bigger investment of equipment that we haven't quite wanted to do yet in order to do something like that. So
I really like that. Avi, thank you. Thank you for throwing a chink there. I was like, no. So as we move to, thank you for sharing that rounded up our second topic. So I know this is a hot topic, and it's actually in the definition of what we said we were going to talk about today. So I'm now interested in how the three of you decided to choose the right co-packer or deciding to do it yourself. So again, Minnie, can you please kick this topic off and share with us your thoughts about co-manufacturing, to be or not to be?
Yeah, I guess I'll start off by saying, when I wanted to start this business, it was really, I was working as a chef and I was like, I'm going to start a food business. That's a very, very, very broad thing. But at the time, I didn't realize that. And then over the years, as I learned, when we grew a little bit, we started at Hope in Maine and tested our idea. I started to meet other, CPG business owners. And then I really shifted my mindset to CPG and focusing on that and learning more about that. And then, we progressed a little bit more, and we were, manufacturing our own product. We always have. And so I really now identify as a manufacturer. So I think that's the first thing, is just to what are you? Are you a marketer? Are you great, great at developing products, and you are great at telling your brand story, marketing it, and, or are you, more into making the product? And I think for us, we obviously want to grow our sales, and we spend a tremendous amount of time focusing on production and manufacturing. And so if there was a fermentation, a very, good fermented vegetable co-manufacturer, that was practical to work with, in the region, I definitely would have probably considered that starting out, but there wasn't anyone out there who was doing that. So what happened is we invested a lot in our manufacturing, and we just figured if we could get really good at making kimchi. We literally have only made 2 SKUs for the last 5 years. This year is the first year we've actually introduced 2 additional products. So we really have put in the time over the last 5 years, and I do feel like we are I'm very happy with where we're at. I feel like we can make really good kimchi, but we're at the point where we are co-manufacturers. We're actually producing products for other companies and helping other businesses grow. And that's been really good, because it has, given us some cash flow, and it's also kept our team, on their feet, and they're learning skills, and we're making money, so. But I definitely think, at some point, for other products that we develop, we might, explore that if it makes sense.
Okay.
For example, if I was going to do, we got the fermented vegetables, but if we, because we're really a healthy Asian food brand, we're starting with fermentation, but we have other ideas for products, maybe some shelf stable products. So if we went to a different category, that's probably where we would start to explore finding a co-manufacturer.
No, Minnie, I really like how you shared, and I think this resonates with all of us. before I moved to Ben. And that's where you didn't have the option. You had no option. And yet, because that option wasn't available, you made a great product to the point where instead of looking for a co-manufacturer, you became a co-manufacturer. That's pretty awesome. I mean, that's a testament of hard work and really glorifying the work that you do and having two very good products. And so I thank you for sharing that. No, you did not opt to co-pack, and you became one. So Ben, can you tell us to be or not to be, and if not, why not?
Yeah, we decided not to co-pack, but it wasn't really a decision actually in the beginning because we weren't aware of that option. It didn't seem like an option to us. And I did come upon one co-packer that did juice, but they're in Vermont, I think. So there's nothing really nearby, at least that I know of. But for us, it was really about like the vision of our business and
Yes.
the type of product we have. So our product is raw and unpasteurized, and it only has a 3-day shelf life. So if someone else were to make it, it would have to be very close by, and we'd have to have a good relationship with them based on quality. And for us, the apples could be a little bit sweeter or a lot more sour when they're really picked early. So someone's got to know to adjust for that, which I'm sure, that would be a common thing for a juice co-packer. But yeah, you'd really have to have a good relationship with them and trust them. But for us, we would have to pasteurize it in some way if we were to work with someone else, just for logistics and legal reasons. And that's just not what we want to do. We don't want to
Right.
mess with the integrity of that product. So everything that we do is also juice to order at this point, for delivery and whatnot. So for us, it doesn't even really seem like an option. It depends on the product,
Okay. No, and I loved your absolute last sentence that it depends on the product. As many mentioned, it's fermented product. And so there was a vision that there wasn't an option for that for many. And then Ben, to you, in order to manufacture someone do that for you, it did not align with the mission and the vision of your company. And so that is something that really those startups that are wanting to think about co-packing is, do we really want to sell who we actually are? As Amber mentioned in our very first, hers is loose leaf. So she would not co-manufacture to a bagged product unless there's a new product or whatever. And then finally, I want to hear Dinos's take on this. Dinos, co-packing or not to co-pack? What is your take on it, and how have you approached it?
I would reiterate that it depends on the product, and then I would piggyback on that and say it depends on your plan, because it depends on how fast you want to go. If your plan and your company is set up to grow and scale quick, you may be able to find funding and acquire all the necessary equipment and do it that way. But it'll probably be a bit more of a hassle if you're trying to accelerate 100 miles an hour. If you have time and yourself, so maybe you're a bit of a control freak and you want to make sure that things are done the right way, you'll put in the time and you'll take it slow. And you'll also know that in the beginning, you have to prove the concept. So yes, if the concept is proven, if you go to choose a co-manufacturer, you're still going to have minimum order quantities, right? It's got to make sense for both parties to create this business relationship. If you go there and you say, well, I only need 10 cases made, a lot of people will say, well, the business is too small for us to take on. See you later. So there's also a point, there's a leap point there that you may have to do a little bit of a hybrid. You may have to start out making it yourself. You may have to ask around what's the minimum that you can sit on in terms of, if you have all this product made, how long is it going to last? Because, like Minnie said earlier, if you're in the manufacturing business, you're doing a little bit of everything. And if you're choosing a co-packer, you're deciding that, okay, hey, my strengths are, I'm a sales and marketing company. And then the manufacturing is left up to somebody else.
Okay. No, Dinos, that was absolutely a great point. And for rounding us out on that, is that to actually be able to hand off to a co-packer, we should be very intimate with that process that we dated, like it sounds like Minnie talked about. She dated those two products for many, many years, and now she's married to them. And now she's going to start dating some new products and getting to know those. And it sounds like Ben has had juice as well as kombucha, and Dinos, you as well, having I believe 4 or 5 different products. And it sounds like that you've proven those out. So I really appreciate that you guys have shared, like, depending on the product, you might not want to go back, or you might really want to know what your process is. So we have now arrived at our not final destination, our final and 4th topic with our panelists. And we'll move into the topic which Dinos just perfectly set us up for. And that's how to ensure quality assurance. So he talked about it. So Dinos, can you speak to us regarding how you know that today, when you start to manufacture your product, that each process knows they are producing quality products, and how they relay to the other departments when questions arise to potential quality issues or failures? That was a mouthful. I apologize.
Definitely. I think with regard to quality assurance, I think there's consistency and there's quality assurance. There's also food safety. So the 3 of those worlds kind of collide together. And when, I mentioned how much control you want to have, this goes back to, if you decide to go the co-manufacturing route and have that discussion, you really need to have some basic level of quality assurance to even sit at the table and have a conversation, because there could be things happening in that facility that you're unaware of that will eventually affect your product later on down the line. And if you have a basic, floor of good manufacturing principles, then you'll be able to ask the right questions getting into that relationship. For us, we kind of treat it as an everyday thing. So it's cross training, and it's also basic understanding of food safety. And everybody has to know what the GMPs are and what the minimum level of expectation is in order to produce safe food every day.
Okay. And Dinos, for those, I know that this is a food panel, but could you explain for those who are, they're here, they're writing everything down that you and Minnie and Ben are talking about. Could you explain to them just a little bit about, you had talked about these 3 worlds colliding, and you mentioned GMP. Could you just explain a little bit to those who are, they're wanting to go to the next level like you guys, and they're looking up to you? Just talk to them right now and explain that a little bit, how the worlds collide and what are GMPs.
Yeah, definitely. So good manufacturing practices is a basic necessity for any food processor. It could be, they're very simple on that level. It could be anything from personal hygiene, right? So personal hygiene is a basic list of, is somebody coming to work sick? Do they have a runny nose? Do they have shaggy hair everywhere? Are they clean shaven? These things can affect the end product, because anytime you're working around open food that goes into a closed container, there's risk. You know, things like hand washing, these are very, very basic good manufacturing practices that if you're going to do it yourself, not only do you have to have that knowledge before getting into it, but if you're going to grow your team, you're also growing the risk, which is everybody needs to know.
Okay. And Dinos, would you say that, and maybe Ben, and we'll round out with many on this last topic, but would you say that there might be online resources for those individuals who want to learn more about GMPs?
Yeah, definitely. I think you can just type it in. You know, you can pretty much pull up a bunch of different articles on it. You can look at extensive lists. You can look at simplified lists, but the framework is all online.
Okay. I think that's excellent. Dinos, thank you for sharing that. Ben, well, what about you? Ensuring quality assurance. I'm either going too fast or not fast enough. The recipes might be off. The sweet apples are in season. Can you explain to us just a little more as to this product is in a green area, this product is in a red area. This is good, this is bad. Explain to us a little bit about how Fully Rooted really exposes those problems and makes them come to light.
Sure. Yeah, again, it all depends on the product. So each product has its unique, hazards. So with juice, the temperature is a huge thing. But beyond the safety stuff, there's also the flavor quality as well, and that really comes down to training and everyone constantly testing things. So we try to keep certain measurements consistent. When there are controls, we try to keep things consistent. So that really relates more to the kombucha side of things. So when we're brewing kombucha, we want to maintain a consistent level of residual unfermented sugars at the end of a fermentation process so that it's the same sweetness. And then we want to keep it at the same pH level, so it's the same sourness level. And we log every single batch that we have ever made, even test batches, and just to keep that history and tasting notes on, what can create this flavor, what can create that flavor. Because with fermentation, it can be, it can have its own mind. It can do its own things, and you can try to have all the right, control all the variables as best you can, but sometimes that's just not enough, even the temperature. But when it came to when we started with juice, we needed to learn about the product and how to treat it as well. So luckily, we found a HACCP certification class relating to juice that my partner attended, and that really set us off in the right direction as far as how to treat it and what are the risks of what can go wrong if it's mistreated. So, I mean, all that information is luckily out there, and Better Processing School and all those resources.
Wow, excellent. So to me, it sounds like Minnie went from a chef to a manufacturer. Dinos and Ben, I'm hearing texture, I'm hearing taste, I'm hearing time, I'm hearing temperature, I'm hearing pH. So it sounds like to ensure quality assurance that there's a lot involved that sounds like maybe even on an hourly or daily or weekly or monthly basis that has to take place. And it sounds like some of you all in food and beverage have products that are actually alive. And so you got to make sure they didn't die or something like that. So it's pretty serious. So finally, Minnie, I want to ask you about quality assurance, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. So Minnie, if you could share finally, as we're rounding out not just this topic, but the session today, which you guys were amazing on, was, has lean and continuous improvement played a role regarding quality assurance, and has it improved the effectiveness of your leadership team?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a big one. Yeah, 100%. You know, it's given me as a leader, a lot of confidence because when I was at a point where like I don't know if we can do this, you know, if we can get to where we are, where we want to go, and then I met someone that introduced me to you, and his main thing he said was, "Oh, I'm so less stressed now that I did 5S," and I was like, "What? Okay, give me this guy's number." And obviously if I'm less stressed then you know everyone else is less stressed, but no, lean is already baked into our culture and quality assurance as well. It's I agree with what Dino said. There's the food safety, and then there's the actual the quality of the product. Ben and I, we both have products that don't have a kill step, so there is, you know, um, risk for pathogens. Luckily, you know, fermentation is historically known as a very, very safe product, but a lot of it is also educating the consumer. And, you know, Ben, you mentioned fermentation. It's kind of like, it can be so heartbreaking, right? Like it's when you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out because there's so many inputs, the weather, the season, you know, everything. But when it does come out to that consistency that you want and that level of quality that you want, it's also so exciting. So you have that kind of pendulum. For us though, I just feel like, you know, a lot of paperwork, tons and tons of paperwork. I can fill out the paperwork and really tell the story of the product. You know, we use pH, we use, you know, all of that stuff. I also keep an archive of every single batch that we make so that I can go back and check on it. Lots of different tools. I would say Cornell has a good food safety and quality assurance. And if you're most likely gonna have to get a HACCP plan or a schedule process, like I said, depending on what it is. But I think, you know, it's worth it to invest in kind of learning about you know, what you can do to assure the safety of your product. But also, it's really about what Dino said too, just the training. Like everyone in our kitchen has to be trained on GMPs. There are you know, online courses that you can take. Yeah.
Many, thank you. So definitely GMP, HACCP. I've heard Cornell. Thank you for all of you sharing where these resources are. And it sounds like that would be the next step to say, okay, we really need to look into this. And I can only say in all humbleness that an hour spent with the three of you is nowhere near even the start of the iceberg for your hard-won experience. But we're so thankful that the three of you agreed to be on the panel and share the hard-won experience that you did and have learned. I've learned a great deal from the three of you, and I'm confident that those listening have many takeaways. Thank you for sharing this special time with me and everyone listening this afternoon. And I hope that the three of you from me have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And I'm finished with that. If we could address any questions that, again, Avi pointed towards you, Ben, about pasteurization. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, there's a couple of pasteurization methods that are cold pasteurization methods that the product can still be considered raw. One of them being HPP, high pressure pascalization, which you have to use a plastic bottle, which we don't like. We like to keep things in reusable glass. And there's no facility nearby. The closest one is like 100, 150 miles away or something like that. So we didn't want to go around to that path. We thought about it seriously. And that's actually what led us to the HACCP certification, because that's needed for wholesale. And then another method is UV filtration, which requires a different piece of equipment that we could purchase and is attainable to a degree. but it doesn't really work for like deep green juices or all of our products. So for us to scale continuously, it kind of, we have to do it in a logistical way. And we can just add another juicer to the mix and more people and more delivery routes and other methods to get the juice out there within that shelf life. So that's why we also focus on the kombucha for wholesaling to grow that end of the business, because it's really nice to have something with a shelf life over 3 days.
Thank you for sharing it. Minnie, you or Dinos, any last parting thoughts of wisdom to all of us who want to be at the Mineral Spring, Be Your Neighbor building?
I would just leave it with, there's no rush. And whenever you're scaling, I think that's the most important thing. There's no rush. You don't want to be in a situation where you feel like you're going out of control, because from experience, I can tell you, once you feel like you're out of control, it never ends well. So.
I would like to just end on a quote that we use at Cheat Kitchen that I have found is true time and time again, but it doesn't get any easier, you just get stronger.